All right, it's playoff time on the Our Football Radio Network, the OFN Today with Mark Lawrence of Covers.com. I'm Greg DePalma, and Mark, we are finally here for the playoffs. The games start tomorrow, and believe it or not, the New England Patriots are playing tomorrow night. Who would have thought that?
Yeah, my goodness, New England without a bye week in the playoffs, it's like almost the New England Patriots playing without Tom Brady. But, they did it to themselves when they couldn't get past Miami at home, and that's a little bit of head scratching, just given the fact that they knew what was at hand in that football game. They still couldn't pull it off. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about the Patriots soon.
Yeah, and a lot going on this week as well. The clapper is done in Dallas. What about the news of the anti-clapper maybe taking over for the clapper in Dallas if the Vikings were to lose to New Orleans? Have you heard those rumors?
You talking about Mike Zimmer?
Yes.
No, I have not heard those rumors.
Yes.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Jerry Jones checks the ATS point spread records and he
Maybe.
knows that Mike Zimmer makes money.
That's right. Exactly. That's why he's the
Right.
anti-clapper. He's the exact
Yes.
opposite.
Yes, he is.
So, because Kirk Cousins, look, if he doesn't win this game, look, I guess if he throws for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and loses, well, that's okay. But if he doesn't have that great of a game and they lose, the Vikings might try to do whatever they can to trade him. And I know that they could do that based on his contract. I don't know who would want him. For whatever it is, $30 million a year. I don't know. But there could be a lot of changes in Minnesota if they don't win this football game, which, it's still not looking like that's going to happen. But we'll get into that later. And what about the Cleveland Browns? You think Urban Meyer, wouldn't you, if you're the Browns, wouldn't you offer Urban Meyer everything?
Well, it's an absolute mess in Cleveland right now. You know that. I know that. Yeah, you had 5 head coaches, 5 general managers in 7 years under Jimmy Haslam. It starts at the top, and Jimmy Haslam has to look in the mirror and ask himself, what on earth has he created here in Cleveland? When he got rid of John Dorsey, he did so because it was John Dorsey that insisted Freddie Kitchens was to be the head coach.
That's fireable.
And yes, it's very fireable, okay? And so what happens now is Jimmy Haslam wants to hire a head coach and have that head coach work with him to decide who the general manager is going to be and work it the other way around. He just didn't want to have to live with John Dorsey and his decisions. And that decision might well have been Dorsey insisting that Freddie Kitchens comes back. So that being the case, I can understand why he did let John Dorsey go.
Yeah, and that actually, see, when I saw that Dorsey going and then even heard about hiring the coach first, under certain circumstances, most circumstances, that's not the way to go. Usually you want to get your GM in first and have your GM know how, because he's got to put his team together, and he's got to be able to put his team together and share the same philosophy with his coach. That's just normally how it's done. But then I thought, yeah, but if they hire someone like Urban Meyer, he basically would run everything. Because Urban Meyer is not going to go into the NFL if he's not going to be able to have most of the control within the organization as far as personnel and coaching. Basically a Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick kind of deal.
You'd have to figure Urban Meyer would be given close to total control if he were to take over the Cleveland Browns and report only to Jimmy Haslam.
Yes.
But the bottom line here is he would either be a coach / general manager, or he would have a general manager working with him that Urban Meyer would really be directing.
Yes.
So, that could work for Cleveland. But, the bottom line is a total mess there right now. And everybody in Cleveland's wondering, my God, what's going on here? How long do you expect us to keep buying season tickets with this circus that's going on here in Cleveland? So something's got to get righted here real soon. And I happen to think personally that Urban Meyer might satisfy the fans in Cleveland.
I mean, especially it's Cleveland. It's Ohio State territory. Yes. It's perfect. It's almost too perfect that the Browns are going to blow it.
Well, he's from Ashtabula, Ohio, which is only about 60 miles east of Cleveland. So, for all intents and purposes, it would be a Cleveland love fest going on
Yes.
there, between the fans, the coach, and the front office. So it would be good for Cleveland if it happened.
And look, the reason why Kitchens was fired was because it was see unlike some places that 1 year you can say, all right, well, there are these circumstances, those circumstances. Cleveland didn't have any circumstances. They didn't have a rash of injuries. They didn't have bad personnel. They had really good personnel. They had an up-and-coming quarterback, and everybody stayed healthy until their star pass rusher decided to go ape crazy and wind up getting suspended for the rest of the year, which was also one of the reasons why Kitchens was fired, because he can't keep these guys under control. But that, to me, is I mean, if you're a guy like Urban Meyer, you're like, wait a second, look at all the talent I have here. I have all this talent. I've got my quarterback already. Urban Meyer would absolutely get that team to the playoffs next year.
Well, he probably would for the talent that's on hand there. Urban Meyer would also probably get the Dallas Cowboys to the playoffs as
Yes.
well. Lincoln Riley might even do the same thing. But for Cleveland's sake, Cleveland needs some continuity, and it starts at the top. And they're going to need somebody that, one, the fans can relate to, but more importantly, somebody that knows what they're doing. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens didn't know what he was doing, and it also speaks to whether or not John Dorsey knew what he was doing when he insisted Freddie Kitchens be his head coach. So, it also there comes a point when John Dorsey's got to look at the mirror and say to himself, who was the problem here? Was it management? Was it Freddie Kitchens, or was it me, John Dorsey? And I'm beginning to believe it was John Dorsey.
Well, he's going to have a hard time getting another job in the NFL at that level when his resume basically says, I hired Freddie Kitchens. That's a big knock.
Well, the thing that everybody was enamored with John Dorsey was because he acquired all this talent.
Yeah.
But the truth be known, he didn't acquire all that talent. Sasha Brown put all those pieces in place before he got there.
I know. Isn't that crazy? I mean, they got ripped. Sasha Brown and that old regime, and yet you looked at all the talent that they assembled and said, what the heck are they getting ripped for?
Well, only because the win-loss record didn't produce on the field.
They didn't have the right coach. Yeah.
Right, exactly. At the time he was there. So, we found John Dorsey to end up being an overrated commodity for sure. Now, I can understand what Jimmy Haslam's doing is trying to make the right decision here. And I only hope for Cleveland's sake, and, my heart is born and raised in Cleveland here. I hope that he does make the right choice in this next move that he does.
Yeah, because I'm hearing things like Stefanski or Wink Martindale.
No.
It's like, look, Cleveland cannot hire a first-time head coach again. You can't tell me that a guy who feels like he can have a lot of control with this I don't care about the Cleveland Browns. Look what happened to the Chicago Cubs. They were the laughing stock of baseball for years. But what happened? They brought in smart men, Theo Epstein, Lowry, and so forth. They bring these guys in. They changed the culture. It took them a couple of years. They won a World Series. If that could happen with the Cubs, it can happen with the Browns.
Yeah, the talent's right there to begin with. So, just bring somebody in that knows what the hell it is they're doing. And there's a good chance Cleveland could turn it around. They still have a lot of talent in place.
Yep.
A lot of things didn't go their way this football season here. And the truth be known, both Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry played injured all football season long. Give them their credit, give them their due. They didn't sit out, whine, cry, and complain. They went out there every week and still played the game. So you bring them back healthy. You bring back Myles Garrett with the proper attitude. A lot of talent still remains in this Cleveland Brown football team.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about the playoffs that begin tomorrow with the first one in the AFC, the Bills. Actually, before we get into the playoffs, let's talk about the Bills as the long shot to win the Super Bowl at 50-1. That's the big number, 50-1. How surprised are you that Houston is 40-1? That's the second long shot to win the Super Bowl.
Well, between one of these two teams, obviously, is going to take that next step, Houston or Buffalo. So if you have either of those two plays in your pocket, you've at least made it to the division round. And anything can happen from that point forward. My best guess is it would likely more happen best for Buffalo because their defense Houston's really forgotten all about how to play defense here. But the key to what you just said is to win the Super Bowl, not just get there,
Yes.
but to win the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. Buffalo knows doesn't have that formula to win a Super
No.
Bowl. They may make some noise in the playoffs, but realistically, are they going to win the Super Bowl? No. Are the Houston Texans going to win the Super Bowl? No.
No,
Not with
probably
that
not.
defense
No.
and that experience. So I'm going to dismiss both of these football
Yeah,
teams.
Watt, not sure what they're going to get out of him. If he all of a sudden starts tearing it up, which is unlikely, that's it's a huge addition. Look, what the Texans do have is they have Watson and Hopkins. And if Watt is there and looking like the star he is, you've got star power. That's a little bit more of a realistic idea of winning a Super Bowl in my mind than the Bills, who are not going to win the Super Bowl. They're not even getting to the Super Bowl. They're still a long way off offensively. McDermott's done a very good job with the Bills. There's no question how good he's been as a head coach. They're a solid defensive team. They've got a good secondary. I think that's where more of their star power is, actually. But they're a talented defense. They're an up and coming team, but Josh Allen's too erratic for me. I like Houston in this game. I'm a little bit afraid of Houston as a home favorite based on how that's not been a good thing for them this year. So I'd actually, if I'm taking Houston, I don't think minus 145. I think that's the limit for me on the money line, taking a favorite. I would go that route because I would be afraid of even giving 3 because I could see Houston winning a game like 17-16.
Well, it's the kind of game, Greg, that you can make a case for both football teams. Houston for the value for the price at home, Buffalo for their defense, and the way they've won football games on the road this year. So good cases can be made for both of these football teams here. It's obviously going to come down to turnovers in the contest here. I don't like the way Houston finished the season out. They went backwards statistically. In Buffalo, they both laid down the final week of the season. They didn't play starters, so you have to actually throw those football games out. But what you do have here is a Buffalo team that is very confident about playing football games away from home. Houston feeling pretty good that now that Deshaun Watson's healthier. This is going to be a good football game. It could well come down to who scores last.
All right, now before we get into this Tennessee New England, by the way, Tennessee 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. The Patriots are now a juicy 10-1 to win the Super Bowl. So if you're a Patriot guy, you're loving those odds, but they're 10-1 for a reason. And look, this game, even though I am taking Tennessee to pull off the upset, it's bothering me that Jason Whitlock keeps pounding away at Tennessee's going to beat New England. He should know better. He's a gambler. I bet you he's got a side bet with the Patriots as much as he's taking Tennessee on the air this week. He should know better to jinx the hell out of his pick. And I could see the Patriots winning this game, proving everybody wrong. But speaking of the playoffs first, the Patriots, they're just I don't see it. I just do. If they win this football game, they're going to lose next week. So I am not taking the Patriots in the AFC. I think the chink in the armor showed against the Dolphins. That's the first sign. Playing this weekend is the first sign. The next sign is lose either this week or next week, and then the wheels start spinning in the offseason, and maybe Brady's not back. But this is the beginning. I do believe this is it all ends. Every dynasty ends. I do believe this is the beginning of the end at this season for the Patriots. So I'm looking at Kansas City, Baltimore as the two teams that I like in the championship round. The two teams that get the bye this week, and I actually am going to go with the Chiefs to beat the Ravens. I like the fact that the Chiefs have beaten the Ravens the last 2 years, so they've got a little bit of psychological advantage against Jackson and the Ravens that no other team has. So I like that. I'm going to go ahead and I still think the Ravens are a little overrated. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Chiefs as my AFC representative. But the Patriots, I do think the time is almost over.
Well, as you know, New England's never won a Super Bowl when they didn't have a bye week to begin the playoffs. So, that is really going to be a tough uphill road for them to get past here this year, especially with the lack of offense that they have here right now working for them. I will say this about the Patriots, though. I ran this in my database. It's pretty interesting that when they played opponents in the playoffs that have a better record than New England does, with Brady and Belichick together, it's happened 11 times. New England's gone 9-2 straight up into the spread in playoff games against teams with a better record than New England. It's sort of a little wake up Rodney Dangerfield type call for New England, and we could experience that again this year,
Sure.
especially if they hook Baltimore. Okay, I'm more concerned about. I would rather have New England playing Baltimore than I would Kansas City, to be the truth be known, because I think you can have a big experience factor there with Tom Brady over Lamar Jackson. I think Patrick Mahomes is so much more capable of creating everything. And Andy Reid's a very, very experienced head coach. So remember, New England, if they do face either Kansas City or Baltimore, that 9-2 straight up in ATS number is a tough number to overcome. Tough to lay it, especially if New England becomes the underdog here. I give Tennessee zero chance of making it to the Super Bowl. You got Ryan Tannehill, who's never made a start in the playoffs before. This is his first career start doing just that. They've had a nice record, so forth and whatnot. You've got Belichick playing a former pupil here. I read he's only 12. I think it's 12-11 against. It's either that or 14-13 against former assistants Belichick has. So he hasn't really dominated those former assistants like people think that he has. But whenever he's going up against a quarterback in the playoffs that's never made a start in the playoffs, he's a perfect 12-0 is Bill Belichick. I see them winning this football game. I think this is probably the value play of the weekend as far as a price goes. And the situation, New England being at home, red-faced, embarrassed off the home loss at Foxborough, coming right back against this upstart Tennessee team who was on the road last week. I think this is a big value side for the New England Patriots in this football game.
Yeah, I think on the flip side, I think the only way that you can make money on the money line this week is either by taking Tennessee or Minnesota. And I just can't believe in Kirk Cousins in a playoff spot like this with the Saints. We'll get into that in a little bit. It's not that he hasn't won playoff games, but actually, has he, Kirk Cousins, won a playoff game?
I really don't know that. I have to take a look and see. I know we all know about his infamous Monday night record.
Yeah, was that when they beat the Saints 2 years ago? That was Kirk Cousins.
I believe it was.
Oh, okay, so that was the Kirk Cousins. That was his first year then? Okay.
Yes, it was.
All right, because I can't. These Viking quarterbacks, they come and they go, and I kind of don't. To tell you the truth, they don't distinguish themselves very much. Even Kirk Cousins, even though he's making $20 million more than Case Keenum ever did, but look, he's won playoff games before. He's got a talented team. I know that Zimmer's a talented coach. I'm not saying I'd be shocked if they beat the Saints, but I'm looking at this as more of. And I'm not. Look, taking Tennessee in the money line. It's not like I'm going to be confident with Ryan Tannehill out there. I'm not. I'm looking at this as just more of. I need to see the Patriots doing it offensively, and I don't know. I look. The assistant thing works a little bit. Vrabel, he's done a really good job with this team. He did a good job beating the Patriots last year, beating them up big. Look, Casey against Karras could be a huge advantage on the defensive line for Tennessee. We'll see if they could take advantage of that. I'm just looking at this as I usually like taking like one team to pull off an upset early in the first 4 games. This is the way I'm going to go, but I'm not as high as Jason Whitlock, that's for sure, on Tennessee and Ryan Tannehill, especially against the Patriots, for crying out loud. I mean, we could blink in like 5 minutes into the game on Saturday night. The Patriots will be up 14-0, and everybody's going to be going, there you go. It's the Patriots again.
There you go. I think you'd have a better chance than Buffalo to pull that upset, but nonetheless, I understand your thinking.
Well, the money line, the number, you can't really make much on Buffalo or Philadelphia. Minnesota, I think Minnesota's what, about 250 on the money line? Something like that?
Yeah, they look to be a very dangerous football team because they're more than capable. But the thing that really concerns me most about the Minnesota Vikings, Greg, is the fact that if you look at their last 9 games of the season, they only won the yards 1 time. They really unraveled statistically down the stretch, did Minnesota. And I don't want to back a football team that forgot how to outperform their opponents going in the trenches head to head. They're going to need a big effort by Delvin Cook in this football game, and we know New Orleans just cooks. They're cooking right now with Sean Payton 38-12-1 to the spread when they're off back-to-back wins and covers here. It's really, really difficult to jump in front of that freight train right now.
Yeah, Vikings are 33-1 to win the Super Bowl, which is a really good number if you believe in Kirk Cousins. The Saints are 6-1 to win the Super Bowl. Look, rematch of the big game a couple of years ago. You know the Saints want this one. You know they want this one because of what happened to them last year. They're at that home environment. I look at this, though, as a high-scoring game. If you take a look at the Saints down the stretch, when Davenport went out, when Rankins went out, they started to get exposed defensively. This is not the defense from early in the season with the Saints. This Saint defense has got a little bit of, they got some holes now on defense. And I think the Vikings in a dome situation are going to have the ability to put up some points. I could see the Saints winning this game like 42-28. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
I wouldn't surprise me if it is indeed a high-scoring game. Let me correct myself. Minnesota 1-7 the last 8 games in the stats. So bottom line here is they are really getting pushed around on the playing field coming into this contest. And I don't have to reiterate the Mike Zimmer ATM numbers here. They're outstanding. But so too are the New Orleans Saints. I mentioned those off back-to-back wins and covers. How about 18-1 straight up and 17-2 to the spread the last 19 times doing just that? So basically, in my mind, you've got coaches offsetting each other with fantastic numbers. You could take to the betting window in this football game. But I don't think, like I say, Minnesota's playing their best football of the year right now, and New Orleans certainly is playing their best football of the season right now.
And the thing, too, that's going to help the Saints, I don't know that the secondary – look, when you have a couple of former Giant cornerbacks that you're relying on, Eli Apple and now Janoris Jenkins, I think you got some issues back there. And even though the Vikings are probably the one team in the NFC that can expose them more than any other team, that's a good thing. So the Packers, I don't know if the passing game this year, I would worry about that. And even Garoppolo and Russell Wilson, I don't think they've got that big-time passing arsenal that's going to worry the Saints secondary. So that matchup-wise, I think until maybe the Saints would get to the Super Bowl, if they face one of those, let's say they face Patrick Mahomes, something like that. But I'm not going to go with the Saints to get to the Super Bowl. I think it's a tougher road. They're going to have to go to Green Bay next. And I've already looked at the forecast. It's probably going to be about 20, 30 degrees. So Drew Brees, he should be in Florida retiring, getting out of the cold weather. Instead, he's going to be in Lambeau Field at 20 degrees. It might be flurries. That could be a big deal, obviously, for Drew Brees and that team. And then they still have to wind up playing, a championship game against maybe a Seattle or a San Francisco, but especially a San Francisco team, which right now is my pick. So I'm not gonna take New Orleans, but I know you've been pretty high on New Orleans. Are they gonna be your pick in the NFC?
It's really kind of rather wide open, and yes, they will be my pick in the NFC if for no other reason by default. Okay. I don't like the fact that they don't have this bye week. They missed out on that opportunity to do just that, but I think they're going to be more of a team possessed. You talk about being a team possessed. You got a head coach here in Sean Payton that I think is willing to sell his soul to the devil.
Yeah, one more Super Bowl. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to work Antonio Brown out to put him on this football team. He went out and he acquired Janoris Jenkins, who's the biggest cancer in a locker room you'll ever find.
I'm worried about that. Yep, that's
yes.
Yep.
Yep, so that concerns me. It does. It really, truly does. But I think they've got the ability to be one of these rare wild card teams that can make a run and win a Super Bowl. We prefaced our write-ups by saying that in the history there have been 7 wild card Super Bowl champions, and 4 other wild card teams have made it to the Super Bowl game but didn't win it. So every now and then you'll find a wild card team that'll make it to the Super Bowl and even cash. And I would say if there's one of these teams this year, that would be the New Orleans Saints.
And that's because the Saints, really, if you look at it, they're not a wild card team.
No, they're a division winner who lost a tiebreaker.
Yeah, they just have to play that extra game. That's all it is. That's the hard part. But they're too good to be
But
a
they'll be labeled as a wild
sure,
card
yeah.
team.
And remember about it's been a long time since we've had a wild card team make a run. I remember we had like a stretch of like 5 or 6 years where like every year or every other year a wild card team made a run to the Super Bowl. But it
Exactly.
hasn't happened in a while.
No, and if it happened this year, they would be I think the logical choice, New
All
Orleans.
right, Seattle and Philadelphia, they're both 25 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. Seattle was my pick to win the Super Bowl, as you know, for a very long time. I have to switch to San Francisco uh, because, look, Seattle's just banged up. Things, I mean, the whole running back thing, I don't know what to expect from Marshawn Lynch. I would, and look, I've in my futures report, I still have good money on Seattle. I still think that they're worth a few dollars if you haven't taken them yet, because 25 to 1 is a big number, just in case Marshawn Lynch got something going. They get Diggs back, which is a big deal in their secondary. He's one of their top players back there. But without Dwayne Brown in this first game, what you're going to have here is you're going to have the Eagles' defensive line with a major advantage against Seattle's offensive line. But on the flip side, you're going to have the fact that the Eagles can't take advantage of Seattle's secondary because they have nobody to throw the ball to. So to me, it's down to Russell Wilson against Carson Wentz in his first playoff game. And I go Russell Wilson every time.
Well, I can understand why because I'm a big Russell Wilson fan myself. What I don't like in this football game is the defense that the Seattle Seahawks are pretending to bring into this contest here. You take a look at the matchups of here, they own the second worst defense. Only Houston's defense is worse than Seattle's of all the playoff teams coming up in the 2019 playoffs. That really, really concerns me here against the Philadelphia team. The other thing is that we call this out in the Playbook newsletter. Home dogs do really, really well in the National Football League playoffs. The best of all home dog rolls is this one right here for Philadelphia. And it's basically any home dog in the NFL playoffs who's taking on an opponent that comes in off a loss. There's only been 6 of them. Those home dogs have won 5 of the games, and they've cashed all 6 times. You got Seattle coming off that war with San Francisco last week where they fell 1 inch short of getting a bye here instead of having to make this long trek here this particular week here. And the Seattle rush defense, they've been up 177 rushing yards a game in the last 4 contests there. I'm a little bit concerned about there as well. It'd be difficult for me to back Seattle in this West Coast, East Coast trip after having just come off of that 15-round thrill in Manila against the Niners last week.
Yeah, I think the benefit is, of course, when you're talking about those recent games, they really didn't have a healthy Jadeveon Clowney. So they get him back in this one. Hopefully, if you're a Seahawk fan, he's going to be active and he's going to make plays. He can't just be out there. So he's got to make an impact because he is a big, big impact for their defense, and he needs to do that. Also, Brandon Brooks, another injury for the Eagles. I mean, nobody really, with all the injuries, everybody's kind of losing sight of the fact that Brandon Brooks, one of the best guards in the NFL, got injured last week, and he's out for the year. And Lane Johnson, even if he plays, is not going to be 100%. So there's so many factors here, injury-wise, that I think that a lot of things cancel out, which is why I say, with all that canceling out, I mean, Russell Wilson's the man in my mind, and I still think Seattle's got an opportunity to do something if they win this game and they play San Francisco next week, because they know how to play San Francisco. That game could come down to the wire again, and maybe they get Dwayne Brown back next week. And again, if Clowney plays well this week and can do that again next week, then all of us, and Lynch, of course, now we've got something else to talk about. But the Eagles are also in a spot which they were pretty good at a couple of years ago when they dogged their way to the Super Bowl championship.
I just really have a difficult time, Greg, backing teams in the playoffs that have allowed more yards than they've gained in the season.
Yeah, I know, right?
And are outscoring their opponents by less than a half a point a game on the season here. You know, Seattle won some very fortuitous football games at the right time of the season here. And I think Philadelphia's got a little bit of this mojo going on right now that we saw in the Nick Foles days when they were winning football games, perhaps that nobody gave them a chance to do. And we'll see whether or not that's the case this
Well,
Sunday.
that's the thing. Will Carson Wentz play like Nick Foles did in the playoffs? Well, we don't know. We'll see.
We don't know, right? We're going to find that out.
And also, let's remember, Seattle had a very good road record this year. They were
The best.
they were a better road team than home team, which was really strange considering the home field advantage they have there. This is a situation where they actually, for whatever reason, they feel comfortable in this situation. So
they do. They had the best straight-up road record in the National Football League, better than Buffalo's. I think Buffalo edged them out in the spread wars. But, they do know how to win games away from home. They do have Russell Wilson at quarterback, so those are two really, really good commodities for Seattle to take into Philadelphia.
All right, I'm going to take San Francisco to beat Kansas City in the Super Bowl. That's going to be my pick. San Francisco is 4-1. Kansas City is 4-1. They're both 4-1. So that's going to be my pick. Like I said, I believe Baltimore is overrated because Lamar Jackson is the entire team. I still don't think they have 12 Pro Bowlers. Take out Lamar Jackson, they're a 2-win football team. But I don't know if that offense is going to be able to, that gimmicky offense, which is not going to be anywhere near as explosive next season because everybody will catch up. It always happens. I don't know if they can do it. In the playoffs. I think they can, but I think it's going to be a lot closer. And the games get closer. That means Lamar Jackson's going to have to make some throws. I don't know if he's going to be able to make some throws when it counts. I think Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes are a step ahead of Baltimore, like a year ahead of success. And I like the fact that the Chiefs are actually playing better defense. Spagnuolo has done a great job with that defense over the second half of the season.
Well, that's the key, I think, to the Kansas City Chiefs, and they would be my choice out of the AFC to play New Orleans in the Super Bowl. And the reason I'm dismissing San Francisco is really kind of more of a technical reason, but it's one that is very, very valid and will come into play next football season, and it's this. San Francisco won more games this year than they did in their previous 3 years combined. And when you find teams that do that, they do not step up and perform well the next season. And the last team that we had do just that happened to be the Cleveland Browns this year, who fit that mantra. Next year, it will be the San Francisco 49ers, and they're going to be a very, very popular, overpriced football team. So we'll be snapping our bankroll, fading the 49ers next football season. But just the fact that they're in uncharted waters right now, I'm going to put New Orleans ahead of them to make it to the Super Bowl.
And the other thing I think people need to keep in mind, too, is with the Patriots possibly not making the Super Bowl this year, we might, unless it's Drew Brees, we might have a new quarterback winning a championship, or if it's Russell Wilson, somebody new and fresh. And the one thing you got to remember is if you're a little bit hesitant about one of those quarterbacks, I don't know if that quarterback can win a Super Bowl. Let's just keep in mind that Jared Goff almost won the Super Bowl last year. And if it wasn't for the Patriots, they probably would have won. Now the Patriots are out of the way, a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who I still don't trust, he can win a Super Bowl.
But you said Jared Goff almost won the Super Bowl last year, and my answer to that would be, well, if it wasn't for Jared Goff, they would have won the Super Bowl last year.
I know, right?
That being the case, but you're saying a new blood to win a Super Bowl. Are you telling me that Drew Brees is not new blood? No. He's a little bit too old.
Yeah, Brees and Wilson. Those are the only guys. Everybody else, I don't know. I mean, everybody's immediately going to go Edwards because of the year he's having. But still, I mean, even him, I think that would be unusual. For someone so young. That basically just runs around and doesn't do much with passing the football. It could be one of those years where we have a quarterback, and we've had them before. I mean, even Manning and Brady, when they've won their last Super Bowls, it wasn't about Brady and Manning. It was about the defense, how good Denver's defense was and how good the Patriots' defense was. They scored 13 points last year, the Patriots had won the Super Bowl. I mean, come on. And this offense isn't even anywhere near as good as that offense was last year. and they only scored 13 points to win the Super Bowl.
Well, that would be the Chiefs' edge over the Saints if my pair makes it there, because, as you mentioned, the Chiefs are playing some very good defense right now, under the radar type defense. Maybe not all season long, their numbers won't show it, but over the course of the last half of the season, it definitely does. And as I mentioned earlier, I alluded to earlier, that defense wins championships. It gets you to the Super Bowl. That's why I think Kansas City will win the Super Bowl this year.
And I don't know where I get Edwards from. I meant Lamar Jackson.
I understand.
Lamar Jackson. And you know, what I would like to see, and I think we'll get it, is we might get Houston-Baltimore. And if we get Houston-Baltimore, even though Baltimore destroyed Houston in the regular season, that's a nice little kind of, again, we get back to that Clemson-Louisville rematch. And I used to love those games, especially that matchup specifically, because Clemson used to kick the crap out of Lamar Jackson and Louisville, because they were just one-dimensional, and Lamar Jackson could never. That's the one thing. That's why I still need to see Lamar Jackson win the big game in the playoffs, or of course the Super Bowl. I don't know if he's capable of doing that the way that he throws the football. And I just don't know if he's that type of guy. And I don't think Baltimore's defense is that type of defense either that can carry Baltimore's offense. They're a good defense, but they're not a great defense.
It'll be a heck of a football game, Mahomes and Jackson, should that occur. And both quarterbacks have scrambling ability. Edge to Jackson. Both quarterbacks can throw the football. We're moving Jackson up a little bit that way this year because he did throw it a little bit, but huge edge to Patrick Mahomes there. And the experience edge would go to Patrick Mahomes as well. And that's why I feel if those two teams do meet, it would be Kansas City advancing.
Last, before I let you go, give me a sleeper, a Super Bowl sleeper. The teams, the teams that are 25-1 or higher, which would, of course, be all the teams this week: Seattle, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Tennessee, Houston, or Buffalo.
New Orleans not being on that list, they're playing this week, but I don't think they meet the criteria, obviously, of being that large of a price.
So mine's Seattle, of course, so
yeah,
it's easy for me.
I understand. And while I would like to say Philadelphia, I just don't think this MASH unit can hold up all throughout the playoffs here. So could I call New England a sleeper team?
No, you can't.
I can't.
How about
okay?
Mike Zimmer?
I would think that they might be the sleeper team if they somehow pull the rug on New Orleans.
That's it. They got to win one game to maybe get their confidence going.
And then they would be a team. I read it in Axios Sports this week, and they had a good article on there about Minnesota. And they're the only reason that they're not favored in a wild card game this year is because New Orleans is clearly the superior team of all the teams playing on wild card weekend. They just had a bad draw, did Minnesota. And if Minnesota had not drawn New Orleans and had taken on somebody that I felt that they could beat, they would indeed then be that long shot team, I think, out of this wild card weekend.
All right. And remember, when Drew Brees played in the playoffs last year, the last time we saw him, he didn't play very well. So we'll see whether or not he's got new life. I don't know if it's a playoff thing. I don't know if it was a one-game fluke, because he actually didn't play all that well in a couple of games down the stretch last year. A lot of people were concerned that maybe he was done, but he's looking great. But it's the playoffs, so we'll see. Mike Zimmer, we'll see if he can do something there. But I don't know. I don't see it happening. I think the only way Minnesota wins that football game is they're going to have to outscore the Saints.
Well, that's usually what wins football games.
Yeah.
When you outscore the opponent.
That sounds like something Jason the Clapper would say.
Yes, it does.
Before his Cowboy games. Hey, guys, I think we have a chance to win this game. The one thing we got to do is we have to outscore them. So let's go out. So let's go out there and outscore them, guys. Yeah. All right, sounds good, Mark. We'll talk to you again next week when we have 4 more games. A lot of people love what's your favorite, divisional round weekend or championship weekend?
I would say divisional, only because championship weekend is cut in half as far as the schedule goes. And when getting to the divisional games, you've got some football teams that all have their eyes on the prize. I love the divisional round.
I agree. All right, sounds good, Mark. Appreciate it. And everything else going on at Covers.com is still cooking well, right?
Yeah, Covers is doing real well. I'll have my big wild card play of the year online at covers.com. You can also get that Playbook football newsletter just in time for the playoffs at playbook.com.